friends, Sunwarper here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to take a look at 5 ways you can use the SP404 and only an SP404 if you'd like to play live. I worked out a few different methods to use this live. Some are a little more involved and some are basically DJing with a little more nuance. But today we're going to cover all of them. So if you're looking to start playing live with your SP, let's get into it. Alright, so the first method, and it's probably my favorite, is having a whole track minus a part on one pad, and then having that part chopped up on multiple pads so you can play some sample chops while you have the whole part playing, which also means you can do some effects. So it's kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none, and you'll see why. You'll have one pad, and in this track, Moon Meld, it's here on 13. It's got everything minus this chord progression. What's awesome about this is when you want to be playing parts, you can improv a little bit, but you have the full track playing in the background the whole time. I do have a little bit of more complexity in this one as I have an intro that's before this. So I start with this drone, I play the parts, and then when I get to 6, I hit that so it comes in. Since you have everything on one pad, you can do effects like you're DJing, right? But you can do some live performance on top of it. And since these are separate, you can do different effects to the parts you're playing. You can split these parts into different buses of effects. Bus 1, which is red, has the pads, and I can do, let's say, a filter, and then that won't affect the full track playing. It does get a little complicated if you're trying to perform the sample part throughout the whole song and you're trying to do effects on bus 2. And so you really have to figure out what is most important. Do you want to be performing the part or doing the effects if you're doing it that way? For me, the pad that I'm using is in the beginning. Then it kind of drifts off when the arpeggios and flux synths start. So I can kind of stop and do some more effects. And then when the chorus hits, I come back to the samples. There is a ton of room to alter this method. You could split a full backing track into a couple. So you could have the verse, chorus, bridge, bigger chorus, something like that. Then you're switching between the parts and you could still have the sample chops. It's pretty limitless, but this is a great starting point and definitely one I'd recommend you check out. But what if you want to play a lead or a chord progression with just one pad? So the incredible 2.0 update for the 404 Mark II allows for polyphonic chromatic performance of any sample. So there's a ton you can do with this, but you can play simple leads or even whole chord progressions with just a single sample, and that's exactly what I did for my track Vistic. Even better is there's multiple scales. Let me go into chromatic mode so you can check it out. So this is chromatic mode, and as of right now, it's actually chromatic. But if you tap or push enter, you can go to major, you can go to minor, you can go to Dorian, you can go to, I think that's Phrygian, and then you're back to chromatic. Then if you hit remain, you can put on mono mode, legato mode, but you can also switch to poly mode. And now you can play whole chords. So let's just put on some delay. So for Vistic, I took a single sample from my Behringer MS1 that was in the track. And if I go to a scale, I can actually play if I go up an octave or 2. So I can actually play an arpeggio while the main song is playing. So basically what I've done for Vistic is I have a backing track actually split into 2. So I have this intro bass line. And then over on bus 2, I have this sample. And so when I want to trigger the sample without it making noise, you push down on enter, and hit the sample you want. Won't show anything, but that means you've queued it. And now if you hit chromatic, it's there, so you never actually heard it. So while the song is going, I can play an arpeggio. And I can have the song going. And then the reason I split these from bus 1 and bus 2 means that while the song is playing and I'm in chromatic mode, I can alter the delay time, feedback, level, whatever I want. If I want to put on scatter, I could, but I use delay, but you could put on any effect that you want and you can switch. Now here are the cons with this method. The biggest one is you're basically stuck in chromatic. You can't, to my knowledge, switch back to bus 1 when you're in chromatic, as this is in bus 2 and you just can't switch back. It doesn't let me go back. And even more so than that, it's not exactly easy to switch between the chromatic mode and playback. Basically, if you're in chromatic, you have to exit it and you're back to this one. So basically my setup for this mode is to have the main track of the samples in bus 1, hit play, don't have to deal with it anymore. I'm not doing effects on bus 1 to the main sample. Then the pad and a transition sound are in bus 2, and all I need to mess with is the feedback of the delay for bus 2 for my sample that I'm triggering in chromatic. All right, so sample chops and pattern sequencing. This is kind of the bread and butter of SP performances. I just saved it for the third one because I find the other ones a little easier to translate more complex songs. You'll see why. So there's two ways you can perform in this method. You can have a full track in one bank and you can just trigger everything all together. So you could have drums on the bottom, let's say, and trigger on the top melodic phrases. For a quick example, you could trigger a melodic phrase here, and this is all in one, but you could have multiple chops or something like that. And then when you wanted to, you could bring in the drums. That's one way to do it. The way I prefer is to actually split everything up to a few different banks if you have a lot going on, and do pattern sequencing. So I have several different sounds or several different patterns put together here. So I've got just the piano, right? And it's on bus 1. And then when I want the drums to come in, I've got the drums on bus 2. And I added some bass and melody to this one. And so here, bus 1 and bus 2, I separate melodic stuff, bus 1, drums, bus 2. I prefer the pattern sequencing, but if you're going for more of a lo-fi track or something like that where there's less going on, you could definitely put it all on one bank and just play it if you wanted to. And that's a lot of fun. Once you've got these beats recorded, you can utilize a different method of live performance with stem separation. So if you have a track where you have everything separate, either on your SP or on a DAW, if you're on a DAW, you just bounce out the stems as individuals. So guitar is one bounce track, drums would be another, or however you want to split them up. If you're on an SP, you can record out each thing with everything else muted, or you can move stuff from the SD card over if it's full recording on a pad. But let's say you've got a track you recorded as an improv, or that you recorded playing method 3 where you just performed everything all at once and you can't separate the stems because it's all performed and it's recorded as a stereo 2 track. Well, you can do stem separation with something like Serato Studio, which is free, or Koala Sampler, which is a couple bucks on iOS. So basically what these will do is separate the stems into a couple different tracks. You'll get the drums, you'll get the bass, you'll get pretty much all of the melodic stuff, and then you'll get vocals if there's vocals. Just be warned, especially with some of these stem separators, they can have a lot of artifacts, but if you're playing a full track back together, you may not notice it. And that's exactly what I did for Soundtrack for a Rainy Day. So I recorded this on my SP just changing patterns and playing live on a Volca FM. I didn't want to try to replicate those parts because the improv was what made the track, and so I had to just separate the stems, and I put them all on 4 pads on the SP, and I pad linked them so they all play together when I hit 1. So how it works is pad 1 is doing the synths, pad 2 is the bass, pad 3 is a doubled synth I made that's a little thicker and has a little more low end, and then pad 4 is the drums. And just like all these other methods, I have the melodic stuff on bus 1 and the drums on bus 2, so I can do some effects to just one part of it and the rest don't get treated. And this is a great way to DJ a track basically, or just do a bunch of effects to something with it playing in the background, but you have a lot more control where if you wanted to do some crazy DJ effects loop on the drums and it's gonna cause the pitch to change, we don't have to worry about that because the melodic stuff is on a different bus. So that's the greatest benefit of that. And you can again take this a bit further by splitting each part of the track into separate pads and even beyond that. As it stands with how I'm doing it, you're basically DJing the track and playing effects, but you have the ability to only affect the drums or the melodic sounds separately. We've been teasing DJing, let's talk about DJ mode. To do that, you just hit D and J. Now you're in DJ mode. You get 2 tracks you can switch between, and you get volume for each. And once we get the tracks in, you'll see what you also get in terms of stuff over here. You can see it though on the pad: bend, BPM, sync, rewind, pause, play, and cue. And that's for both channels separately. So let's put something on. We'll put my track farther on 1, and then on 2, let's put Life Returns. All right, so we'll start with it. And if we hit sync, so now we've started playing this second song. I tried to hit it on the beat. We'll see if it works. And you can just fade out 1. And just like everything else, you get these awesome effects. So another awesome thing about DJ mode, let me rewind the track, is while you're playing a track, you can hit hold and you're back in all the pads, so you can trigger one-shots, samples. So while this is playing, and then you just hit hold and you're back here. And now you can do there you go. That's DJ mode. It's my least used mode, but not because it's bad, I just don't really DJ. But if that's your thing, or if you really want to go hard on the effects, this is the way to go. And I love that you can go back to the pad mode and trigger one-shots. Last quick bonus method is add a small synth, something like a Volca FM, even a groovebox like a Circuit Tracks. If you add this external gear, you open up a whole new world and layer to live performances. I like to pair the SP with my Circuit Tracks or even the Volca. You can even plug in a guitar. It has its own amp sim. Using external audio also adds another bus effects in the form of external audio effects. So you get there by hitting input setting, then input effect. As long as you have external source on and something plugged in, you get a whole other effects. So if you're using another sampler, you could do more effects on that. If you've got the guitar, amp sim, if you've got a groovebox, you could put a compressor, effects, anything like that. If you wanted to, you could mute the other effects from treating the input effect, or you could have it all together. Just a heads up, it will only work with the audio coming into the SP, but it's more effects, which is never a bad thing, unless they're hard to get to. So since I'm playing all original music, I like to use pre-masters or tracks I haven't mastered so that the volume can be balanced out live with the SP. And that's where bus 3 and 4 comes in, which you hit shift EFX settings or pad 16. You can see I have cassette and compressor on bus 3 and 4 respectively to do some light mastering and bring the audio a bit up in volume and glued together, since all these songs are a little different sounding. If you're willing to go digging for these effects, it is possible to use 3 and 4 for additional effects like reverb. Just know it's pretty annoying to get to these effects if you're trying to use them live. I would stick reverbs and effects like that in bus 1 and 2 and use 3 and 4 as more of a stagnant, never changing effect. So there you go. That's how I play live with my SP404. Do you play live with your 404? Let me know in the comments if you use any of the methods I talked about today or if it's something completely different. That's all I've got for today. I appreciate you hanging out. If you found this video helpful, you can help support the channel by leaving a like or subscribing if you haven't already. It helps the channel a ton and allows me to do more of these types of videos. And I've also started doing some beat making live streams, so if you want to see how I make my tracks using this MIDI mountain behind me, make sure you're subscribed and you'll get notified when I go live. But of course, just hanging out is more than enough, so until next week, thanks for watching.